that there is a battle between good and evil, right? I have a unique role in that battle, right? It's only when I unsheath my sword, when I spread open my heart, when I allow myself to be penetrated uniquely by the thrust of cosmos, which yearns for my transformation, which is the transformation of the whole, that I actually have the full joy of my power. I'm here in Vermont, and I have a dear friend here with me that I haven't seen in about a year in person. We've spoken on the phone a lot, and he has a slightly different sleep schedule than I do. So I was up till kind of the wee hours of the morning, and am just kind of sliding into the day on my friend's schedule. And very, 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 very much wanted to make sure that we got to be together today. I know it's been a kind of an intense couple of weeks. Last week I was in raging fever, and this week in a little sleep after a long night of talking in the structures of the new story, the structures of the Dharma. We're spending about 3-4 days here, myself with 2 other people, just kind of taking a kind of deep look at the new story and trying to take it to the next level. And what we want to talk about today is this very huge question, which we're going to feel into, we're going to talk about, we're going to engage the new story of value, which is why we come here together. We come here together because we understand that at this moment in this time between worlds, in this time between stories, as we face a meta crisis. And yesterday afternoon, before my friend came, someone else was in the house. It was a very beautiful man who, I won't say his name, 1 or 2 of you know him, runs a financial firm. And, you know, he is just a beautiful family man and a kind of classical best of the United States, just good human being, you know, in his mid-40s, who, you know, as he always tells me, you know, when we talk about markets and financial markets, you know, markets always stabilize. And ultimately, in the long run, you know, everything's fine. And I've been taking him a little bit in the last 1.5 years into the challenge to the everything's fine scenario. And we did a deep dive yesterday afternoon from about, you know, 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock, where I tried to very tenderly deconstruct his worldview that everything's fine. You know, I tried to deconstruct the everything is fine view, the it's going to be okay. Well, it might be okay in the end, right? But if it's going to be okay in the end, we're going to have a lot to do with it, right? From the perspective of how reality is actually functioning, we are at a moment before sets of system breakdowns that are significant, that are severe. I'm talking about what happens if, God forbid, you have a catastrophic event in India and 200 million people die in a week. That is tragically a plausible possibility right now, right? In terms of how we've constructed reality and our optimization for efficiency and not resiliency. The vulnerable populations are most subject to catastrophic risk, right? Witnessed as unbearable tragedy, which we don't even know what to do with, how to respond to, right? Let alone, right, what does it mean for the 200 million people whose lives are cut tragically short? That's catastrophic risk. We face multiple vectors of catastrophic risk. And then even more profoundly, we face vectors of existential risk that are more real than real when you actually look very carefully at them at their structures. And We're here, though, not to engage in a kind of affirmation of doom, quite the opposite. We're also not here to engage in kind of sophisticated forms of denialism, right? Quite the opposite. We're here to proclaim a new dawn, right? A new possibility. Our response to devastation, right, is Da Vinci, right? That is to say, right, the new possibility, the dawn of a new realization, right? A new world story, a new world philosophy, a new story of value, which when we actually look at history is actually the single most potent force that actually changes the vector of history. So telling the new story, but not making up the new story, not conjecturing a new story, not simply declaring a new story, but actually doing the deep hard work. I was taking a walk with my friend last night. We took a walk at about, I don't know, 1 a.m. and we walked a little bit around St. Johnsbury. And I told him I'm, X and X years, I told him how old I was. I'm, by the way, just if anyone's curious, I'm 93. I look a little young for my age. That's not true. But I told him that, my guess was that it would take, X amount of years to finish the first stage of the Great Library. And, I told him that my guess was that I would be, I don't know, 70, right? When we could kind of feel like, okay, we've got a basic great library in the world. Now we can take the next step. That's a big deal, right? Writing a great library is not a picnic, right? But it's the only thing we can do that actually tells the new story of value, not as a declaration, but that creates a quality of literature, a quality of depth of the kind that emerged, let's say, in the Renaissance in Florence from the Florentine Platonic Academy, right, convened by Cosimo de' Medici and Marcello Ficino, and which created a level and a depth of art and a depth of science, right, and a depth of connecting the dots between the arts and the sciences and the emergent humanities and the, later to be anthropologies, if you will, and the senses of history, and weaving them together into a new story of value that changed our actual knowing of reality, our relationship to reality, our experience of reality, and allowed us actually to overcome the travesties of the shadows of the Middle Ages and birth the dignities of modernity. And as I've said in this context, 1,000 times, right, we did a really good job. And we have to be super proud of ourselves, but we missed some very important things in this new story of value. And those things we missed, those plot lines we got wrong in the new story of value, birthed the disasters of modernity, which have led us directly to this moment in history where we are before a meta crisis, which could actually result in, and probably will result in, levels of catastrophic risk and potentially existential risk to our very existence, either the death of humanity, right? Now there's the end of humanity as we know it, extinction of some form, or the death of our humanity. We cease being human beings as we understand human beings to be. And so our response to that is actually filled with joy. The joy of being able to respond. The joy of being able to participate in responding to this time between worlds by actually telling a new story of value. That's actually our response. That actually by telling a new story, by realizing that we're again in a moment like the Renaissance, but with the stakes exponentially higher, right? As we're defined by a world of exponential technologies, which have capacity to inflict catastrophic and existential risk level events. Our capacity to respond to that, to tell this new story of value, right, is the greatest joy of our lives, the greatest celebration of our lives, and the greatest possibility. It's what we were born to do. It's why we went through generation after generation and found ourselves in this generation and this time and in this place, and these people and this band of outrageous lovers and this unique self symphony that's come together here in One Mountain, Many Paths, which I was delighted to convene together with Barbara Marx Hubbard, who spent her life in this as well, in this great enterprise, right? We're here. And so we're here with mad joy. And every week we look at a different dimension of this new story of value. And what we've been saying, if you've tracked the last few weeks, for example, is A, that story is real. Story is a real structure of cosmos. Two, that living my particular story evolves the whole story. Right? Live your story is the categorical imperative cosmos, and my personal story transforms the entire story, and the entire event of reality is actually a story. So reality is not actually an event, it's a story. Now, what we want to talk about today is what's the storyline? What's the plot line? And we want to talk about one dimension of the plot line. And I apologize somewhat insincerely, but I'm going to do a show of hands, and this is just to make me feel better. So if you're up for making me feel better for today, you can do this. And if you want to make me feel worse, you can vote no. Okay. And I know that for most of you, what I just said is not new, but I didn't mean this as information. I wasn't trying to share new information. I was trying to locate ourselves. So what I just did in the last 7-8 minutes was closer to a ritual than an informational sharing. Does that make sense, everyone? It was more like a ritual invocation, right? And we need to do that ritual invocation in order to locate ourselves. That's called practice, right? We actually train, we entrain our hearts, we entrain our minds, we practice in order to access the inside of reality and to feel our place on the inside. So just a quick check-in for how many people was that helpful, right? Not as information, but as invocation. And do you understand, friends, what I mean by invocation? Why the invocation matters? Why the invocation is not information? It's not like, all right, oh God, he's saying that again. Right, he's saying that again. Okay, I know that. Let me wait till he's done saying that. I joined One Mountain this week. Oh, sorry, I knew that. Why did I bother to join? No. The invocation is everything. Right? The invocation is everything. So we're invoked. We invoke. Right? That's what we do in mysticism. That's what we do in magic. It's what we do in true politics of revolution. We invoke the reality again and again. And so this week, what I'd like to do with your permission is to talk about one dimension. And David's going to read a code. It's one-line code. And then we're going to talk about one dimension of the story, which is insanely critical. And the dimension is the response to a question, which is there a battle between good and evil? Right? Is there a battle between good and evil? Or is that a made up, is that a kind of arch conservative meme that, good liberals, realize is absurd? Right? Is there a battle between good and evil? And if there's not, let's declare that there's not and get it off the table. And if there is, what's its nature and what's our relationship to it? Is there a battle between good and evil? A. And B, do I have a role in that battle? There could be no more important question. Is there a battle between good and evil taking place today, number one? And number two, do I have a role in that battle? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And then we're going to find our friend Leonard Cohen and we're going to pray, because if there's ever something to pray about, it's about that question. But let's talk about that today in a kind of deep way. So David, brother, give us a code. Give us a code, right? Right. David's outside and looking like the outside and feeling good over there. Wow.
I'd like to read the code. It's a very simple one, but it's so profound in this intimate universe, this intimate cosmos here, that evil is a failure of intimacy. Evil is a failure of intimacy. And with that, I'll do it one more time. How about that, Mark? Evil is a failure of intimacy. I turn my word back to you.
God, David, thank you. Right? Thank you, David. Right? Evil is a failure of intimacy. So we're going to have that in the backdrop. Evil is a failure of intimacy. That's a definition of evil. Okay? Evil is a failure of intimacy. So let's start with the beginning. And let's go step by step. So one, before we talk about what it means about evil being a failure of intimacy, let's talk about, is there a battle between good and evil? So I want to make this very short. It's going to be a short One Mountain. Yes, there is a battle between good and evil. That is actually not a mistake. That is true. There is a battle between good and evil. That's number one. Number two, are there forces of evil in the world that are real? So I believe the answer to that question is also yes. Right? I think evil has a reality in the world. And its evil is not simply, as Aristotle was wont to say, privation, right? Evil's not simply kind of an absence of the good, if you will, right? Evil has a mythic ontology, okay? Evil is real. And the ontology of evil is critical to understand. Now, three, that doesn't mean that there's this equal battle between good and evil, and that evil is an equal force opposite to the good, and these two equal forces are battling it out, which would be, for example, some versions of particular Gnostic views, Gnosticism, right? Understood there's this battle between good and evil in this world, and they're battling it out. They're struggling it out. They're duking it out. They're fighting it out, right? It's this fight to the death, if you will, between good and evil, between these two equal and opposite forces. That's not the case, right? There is an ultimate sense. There is an ultimate reality, which is pure good, which we can access, which we can feel, which we can taste. And it's the reason that Aquinas's favorite verse in the sacred texts was from David, father of Solomon, where the text reads, Ta'amu ur'u kitov Adonai, taste and see. The divinity is the good. Taste and see that God is good. And there's a taste, there's a direct access, there's a direct knowing that the good, that value is real. And in some ultimate sense, the arc of reality tilts towards the good. The long arc of world history tilts towards the good. The long interdimensional arc of reality, meaning the arc of reality that transcends this world, that ends the trance of this world being all there is. We have to transcend the world, but we transcend the world by ending the trance of this world that would claim that this world is all there is. This world's not all there is, right? There's actually a very deep realization that we know through direct gnosis, direct knowing, right? That actually this world's not all there is. This world is a movement towards, and we move through worlds and we move through dimensions, right? And even as we are sitting and talking right now, multiple dimensions live and are in play. And the full eros of reality is not limited to this dimension, which is why when a person dies, it's not the end of the story. The ontology of story goes on. Having said that, there's a battle between good and evil. And actually understanding that evil has power is critical. That's what Tolkien was trying to say when he did Lord of the Rings. And he talked about the eye of Sauron, right? He was trying to convey this sense that there's some ontology to evil. And by ontology, he meant there's a real power. It's called, in the lineage of Solomon, Sitra Achra, right? The other side. The other side. And the other side is a force of deadness. It's a force which is anti-erotic. It's a force which is anti-life. It's a force which is anti-value. So just like there's a field of value, there's a corresponding, but not equal, but a corresponding field of anti-value. And the way Solomon wrote it, the way Solomon talked about it, Solomon wrote Zeh lu'umat zeh bara Elohim. This corresponding to this did the creative divine manifest. There's a tree of life and there's an anti-tree of life. There's power, there's seductive power to evil. And evil actually is live, right? Aliveness, live, spelled backwards. That's what evil is. Evil is the defacing of the name, right? Evil is the reduction of the human being, the death of our humanity. And I want to try and get this clearly. The battle is not between one religion and other religions. That was a pre-modern view of the battle between good and evil. Not true. It's not between Judaism and Islam or Christianity or between sects in Islam, Sunnis and Shiites, much as Sunnis and Shiites think that's true today. And it's not between Catholics and Protestants, right? And it's not between sects of Buddhism or between sects of Hinduism, between Muslims and Hindus in India. That is not where the battle of good and evil lives. Right? That itself, that notion, that caricature of the battle is evil. And it's not between Jews and non-Jews and blacks and whites and yellows and reds. And this group of Mao's Red Guards in the Cultural Revolution who were aligned against a different group of Red Guards. And there were two major groups of Red Guards that engaged in this battle of good and evil between each other in the middle of Mao's Cultural Revolution. It's not between, North and South Vietnam. Remember that in the 60s, mid 60s, early 60s. It's not any of those things. Right? The battle between good and evil is between the forces of life and wholeness and value and the forces that stand against wholeness, the forces that stand against value, that stand against the field of value, that stand against life itself. That's deadness. That's a sitra achra. Sitra achra is the other side, but the other side means the image of side is achor, which is back, as opposed to face. So when we're in life, we're face to face. We're panim el panim. In the book of Genesis, chapter 32, we're face to face. We're willing to face off, but in the deepest way. And face means interiority. Face means the deepest realization that we are both expressions of the field of life and of the field of value and of the field of desire. And that clarified desire is for life and clarified desire is for value. And when we see each other's face, we see the desire on each other's face, the clarified desire, right? And we turn towards other in devotion because desire evokes devotion. The battle between good and evil is when I turn my back on you, when I don't see your face, when you become an it to my I, you become an object to my subject, you become instrumental to my ends. You're already dead. I've deadened you. I've killed you. I've already murdered you. I no longer can feel your infinite subjectivity. I can't feel the murmurings of the sacred that move through the throbbing of your heart. I can't feel the pulsing of your yearning. I can't feel the desperation of your loneliness. I can't allow my soul to be purified by the cleansing power and purity of your tears. I've turned my back on you. That's sitra achra. That's the side of the back. The other side is the side of the back. I've othered you. I'm no longer face to face with you. I've killed you. I've murdered your life force, your humanity. which is why, right, the lineage masters say that when you shame a person and their face goes white, it's an act of murder, because I can't feel your humiliation. So you're dead to me already. So I'm on the side of Sitra Achra. I've turned my back. I've othered you. You're the other side. You're the side of the back. So there's a battle between good and evil, between value and anti-value, between all the forces all over the world who stand for life are part of the side of life. It doesn't matter what the color of your skin is, and it doesn't matter what your ideology is. It matters, am I on the side of life? Am I on the side of wholeness? So I want to go deeper into this, okay? So where does evil come from? Right? Where does evil come from? Right? How does evil, if you will, kind of find a place in the world? And can we go slow here? Let's just kind of go, and I want to just kind of, are you with me, everybody? Are we together? I want to just try and kind of like unpack this together step by step. Where does evil come from? Okay, so evil comes in the wound. W-O-U-N-D, and this is crazy important. Evil, right, comes in the wound. That's where evil comes from. Evil comes in the wound, right? When I'm wounded, when I'm hurt, when I feel offended, when I feel insulted, and my wound hijacks me, my wound dissociates me from the larger whole. Because that's what wounding does. Wounding causes trauma. And what trauma means is I go into a place of pain, right? A kind of pain trance that narrows myself. I get smaller, right? I move from my wider self, from my expanded self, from my whole self, right? From my house that's a mansion with many rooms, and I am hit by pain, often early childhood pain. Sometimes that early childhood pain is recapitulated again and again, right? And I'm re-traumatized. And what trauma does is it narrows, right? It's called in the lineage, right? When I'm in pain, when I'm in trauma, I descend to Egypt. And the word Egypt means Mitzrayim. It means the narrow place. When I go, I step out of the wide places, right? David writes, Solomon's father, I yearn la merchavim ivtan nafshi. I yearn to walk in the wide places, right? I step out of the wide places and I go down to Egypt. And in Egypt, I'm in the narrow places. So I'm in this pain trance in which my vision is narrowed and I'm completely oppressed by the feeling of being wounded, the feeling of being insulted, the feeling of something being unfair, something being wrong, and I can't see the whole anymore. And all of my perception and all of my depth becomes single unit focused on that point of pain. I can't see the whole. So evil comes through the wound because the wound contracts my capacity, the wound contracts my capacity. Let's get little English words out here, right? To see the whole and to feel the whole. That's what the wound does. The wound cuts me off from the whole. The wound cuts me off from my ability to be Homo, Amor, to be omni-feeling of the whole, omni-intimate with the whole. Right? Intimacy means shared identity. That's what intimacy means. Intimacy means shared identity in the context of otherness. I'm here. I individuate. I'm living my life. I'm a unique expression of the whole. But I recognize the whole and I feel the whole, and I'm in a field of value with the whole, and I have shared purpose with the whole. That's intimacy. That's the intimacy equation and the interior science equations and the first values and first principles equations of reality. That's what intimacy means. Intimacy means that larger sense of shared identity. So when I'm dissociated, when I become non-intimate with the whole, when I become non-intimate with the whole, when I can only feel my own pain, I can only feel my own suffering, when I get cut off from the whole, then evil comes. Evil comes in the wound. And then I see my particular set of wounds. And, it might be in China, right? I'm coming out of the century of humiliation imposed by the British, who introduced opium into China, right? In a horrific way. And China goes through a century of humiliation and defeat that it's now just coming out of. And you can't understand Xi and you can't understand China without understanding that century of humiliation, which is real. And I focus on my often real wounding, right? And I can't actually see the whole. I can't feel the whole. I've demonized the other. I've turned my back on the whole. And then what I do is I take my suffering and I turn it into my identity. And usually I choose a value or some dimension of a value, and I make that value my what? My flag. I make that value my identity. I fight for that value, but I can't see the larger field of value. I can't see the larger whole. I can't see how you feel, right? I'm so in the rightness of my hurt, which is right, which is valid, that I can't feel your hurt. So evil comes in the wound. The wound takes me out of my larger intimacy with the whole. I can't feel you anymore. I can't feel the whole anymore. And so I'm now stuck in the part. I'm now partial. Right? I'm now dissociated from the whole. I can't be now omni-considerate for the whole. I can't be omni-responsible, Bucky Fuller's phrase. Right? I can't be intimate. So evil is a failure of intimacy. Evil comes with the wound. And my friends, and I want to say something a little bit hard now, right? Right. So we're all wounded. We're all wounded. Right? There's no healer that's not wounded. We're all wounded. We all are Jacob, who wrestles in the darkness and is wounded by his encounter with life. And it's only after I'm wounded that I have the capacity to reclaim wholeness. And that reclaiming of wholeness, after I'm wounded. In other words, I begin my life and I'm living this pre-tragic life. I haven't been wounded, or I have such a good explanation of my early wound based on my fundamentalist theology or New Age theology. I've got it all worked out, so I haven't actually experienced the wound. I've been wounded, but I haven't experienced the wound because I've blocked the experience through some form of explanation, which actually claims more power than it has and obfuscates my ability to actually feel the wound and be in the wound. So I'm pre-tragic. Right? And then at some point, I meet the tragic. Right? I meet the wound. And that's where the battle between good and evil begins. Right? That battle begins when I actually am invited to transform. And transformation is not growth. Growth means you get bigger and bigger. Growth is an automatic or a function of the autonomous human, the autonomous nervous function. Growth happens. But growth becomes a pseudo-eros of the actual eros of reality, which is why we have exponential growth curves that fall off, because the eros of reality is not perpetual growth. The eros of reality is transformation. And that's what reality is. Reality is, in the manifest world, reality is evolution. And evolution is a series of transformations. And it's a series of transformations in which parts transcend. They end the trance of their partness, and they have this capacity to be allured towards, right? They experience the lure of becoming, right? The lure of becoming. I'm allured to this larger field of becoming, and I want to become more. I want to be more than I was. I want to join that other part, and I want to engage in the ultimate erotic act of synergy in which I become more. I've transformed. So evolution is a series of transformations. And transformation itself is a first principle and first value of cosmos. That's the nature of reality. It's not an accident. It's not the mechanics of cosmos. It's the place that the mechanics and music of reality come together. And the music expresses itself in the methodologies of evolution, and the methodologies of evolution are animated by the Eros value of cosmos, which is reality reaching for realities, what Whitehead called reality's appetition, appetite for more value, for more depth. So transformation is the transformation towards greater depth, and that is the structure and quality of evolution. And the battle for transformation is the battle between good and evil. And that battle takes place not out there. That battle takes place inside of me, deep inside of me. Because to be a human being is to be a unique vector of transformation. So it means to be a human being. It means I participate in the field of evolution, and the field of evolution participates in me. I participate in the intimate universe, but if I know science at all, I realize that the intimate universe participates in me. I live in the intimate universe, but the intimate universe quite literally lives in me. And the desire for this wider intimacy, in which I actually step out of my blindedness that comes from the wound, and I access my split off parts, and I bring them in a relationship with my other parts, and I create a new possibility at my unique point of transformation. And this is where it gets alive. This is where it gets exciting, right? There's a transformation that I can do that no other single person on this call can do. But that is true of every single one of us. That's what it means to be a unique self. Separate self can't ultimately transform. You can move chairs around on the deck of the Titanic, but actually, I don't actually have the capacity as a separate self split off from the flesh of reality to transform. Nothing actually ultimately changes, right? Very few people change, right? Ever. I then realize, well, I'm not a separate self, I'm a true self. I'm one with the field. I say, there's nothing to transform. No place to go. There's nothing to do. My only transformation is the realization that there is no transformation that needs to happen because I'm ever, always, already present in the field of the one. There's nothing to do and no place to go. Right? That's true and completely not true. Right? That's the truth of being. And then I get deeper and I actually emerge from true self into unique self. And I realize, no, actually, I'm a unique quality of the field. I'm a unique quality. I'm unique qualia. I'm a unique expression of the field of consciousness and desire. And that impulse of transformation lives uniquely in me. And my transformation is not your transformation. Like, to be alive is to have what the lineage masters called a unique tikkun, right? A unique fixing, a unique weaving, a unique way in which I can heal and repair the cosmic rend, a unique gift, right? There's this unique song that I can sing, and it's a song of transformation. And there's a unique poem that I can write, and it's a poem of transformation. And there's a unique laughter, and there's a unique, right, quality to my tears, and a unique chemical composition to my tears because my tears are chemically composite in relationship to the particular and unique circumstance of my life. So I have unique laughter, and I have unique tears, and I have a unique story. And that unique story is not the story of my separate self. It's the ontology of story, right? Which lives alive uniquely in me. I am reality storied uniquely in my unique vector of transformation. And to count means to be accountable. The utter fucking joy of being accountable. The radical joy of knowing that I count, that my vector of transformation matters, that actually the early feminists were right. The personal is political, and the political personal is cosmic. And there's no detail of my unique story of transformation that is disconnected from cosmic magnificence. And to the precise extent that there's an alienation between my personal story of transformation and the larger story of transformation, I feel alienated from the whole. And as long as there's any detail of my personal story of transformation that's alienated from larger cosmic magnificence, my mind is not allowed ease. I can't rest. I don't experience myself as being welcome in the cosmos. I'm not welcome in the cosmos until I realize that my transformation is the transformation of the whole. And that is the battle between good and evil that does take place in me, right, as me and through me. And I need to be wise. I need to be wise because, of course, in this battle between good and evil, that which seems to be evil often has sparks of the good and sparks of the noble, and sparks of possibility. And that which appears to be good can often cover up, right, sparks of evil and of corruption and of degradation, right, and of anti-value. So value and anti-value are not split by a sharp dividing line. Life and anti-life are not split by a bright red line, but they are inter-included and need to be disambiguated carefully, right, within my own being, within my own, there's a beautiful image in one of the lineages of Luria, who's an inheritor of the Solomon lineage, and it's offered by Naphtali of Ropshitz, who's one of the masters in the lineage of the Baal Shem Tov, the master of the good name, who invokes the Hasidic movement that sweeps the Carpathian Mountains, right, in Romania, somewhere around 1760, about which Buber wrote so beautifully in his tales, right, of these masters. Right, and this particular master is about to die. And he says to his students, he says, the Sitra Achra, the other side, right, or that which turns its back on me, right, that we talked about earlier, 45 minutes ago, right, the force of anti-value, right, the force of anti-life wants to grab hold of me right now, even as I'm about to die. Right. And the student said, well, how could the force of anti-value possibly grab hold of you right now? And he says, the master says, right, it makes me want to scream out on top of my lungs, God is good, God is good, God is good. Hear, O Israel, God is good. So that you will see how righteous I am and how holy I am. And he says, that's the force of anti-life, seeking to seize me even in the moment of my death. So anti-life is subtle. Anti-value is subtle. There are many forms that the eye of Sauron takes, right, in its gaze. But the utter joy of knowing and identifying what we want to call now my unique point of transformation. And there's no one who's going to hold me accountable to it. It's often non-obvious. It's non-trivial, but it's also non-obvious. There's no guru who can demand that I do it. There's no law which will legislate that transformation. And yet that transformation is the plot line of my life. Identifying that plot line, knowing that place of transformation is the great joy, the great wonder, right? It's the great play of my life. Now, I want to introduce just maybe one more thought, right? One more just kind of image for a moment. Wow, how many of us are together? We get this, my friends? You get what a big deal this is? That there is a battle between good and evil. Right? I have a unique role in that battle. Right? It's only when I unsheath my sword, when I spread open my heart, when I allow myself to be penetrated uniquely by the thrust of cosmos, which yearns for my transformation, which is the transformation of the whole, that I actually have the full joy of my power. Because my transformation is filled with power and the joy of power. And I have an obligation to be power hungry. There is an ethical obligation to be power hungry. For what? For my unique transformation, for my unique tikkun, for my unique fixing. Now, if I want to identify the plot line of my life, I've got to look at it from two perspectives. And one's called kav. It's the linear movement, which moves forward, which is the linear thrust, which is the obvious plot line, which is why we call it a plot line, right? It's history, right? It's a masculine dimension, right? It's a dimension of the line. And yet there's a second dimension. And the second dimension is not the line, it's the circle, the igul of the circle. And the igul is that which goes round and round, but not in a kind of myth of eternal return. It's not that it's not going anywhere. It's not that it's a wheel that I need to get off of, but rather it's a circle that yearns to become a spiral. Now track this and be with this. Let's be with this really intimately and closely, my friends. If I actually follow the plot line of my life, I realize that my life is circling, yearning to become a spiral, meaning I keep reenacting the same sets of conditions, right? The same people keep appearing in my life, right? The same dynamics keep showing up again and again and again. And it's not the invitation of my life to break that set of dynamics. It's not the invitation of my life to stop the circle. It's to turn the circle into a spiral. It's to be able to live it in a way I was never able to live it before. And I need to become more. And when I become more, when I circle around again and I come, as T.S. Eliot wrote, right, to that place which I was at the beginning. And I realize I've actually never been here before because in some sense I've added depth to reality, a quality of depth, a quality of intimacy, right? A quality of aliveness, a quality of Eros value, right? A quality of joy, right? A quality of all that's good, true, and beautiful that never existed in reality before, meaning a new quality of intimacy. And if I actually realize that God is the infinite intimate, because in every generation we need to kind of synergize all of our knowledge and be able to call God directly by the divine name, and there's a new divine name that discloses itself, an intimate new name, and the name of the divine we're suggesting in this generation is the infinite intimate. We bring the infinite and the intimate into conversation. Right? There's no longer an infinity of indifference, nor is there an intimacy of impotence, but the infinite and the intimate kind of come together in the larger Tao, in which there are no contradictions, and they create this new value. So the infinite intimate, right, lives as the field of the intimate universe. And I'm a unique incarnation of intimacy. Now, when that intimacy deepens, when I bring my split off parts into the story, when I heal something that's fractured in my relationship with you, when the intimate fractal pattern of relationship that is me, right, actually enters into the field of the intimate universe, and I deepen my intimacy and I become more whole than I've ever been before, and I become more alive and more poignant and more filled with authentic pathos and more filled with kindness and more filled with a kind of radical sincerity and more filled with laughter. And my tears become purified, right? I become a quality of intimacy that reality's never known. And because divinity is the infinity of intimacy, the infinite infinite, when I become that new intimacy, I become more, but more what? I become more God. And it's, I am the literal incarnation, right, in my intimacy of more God to come. I am more God to come. That's who I am. That's my identity. It's not just I am, right? It's not just awareness. Reality is not merely a field of awareness. That's not true. Feel it in your body. Reality is a field of awareness which is inseparable from the field of allurement, which is the lure of becoming, which is the lure of your and mine becoming. It's you and me becoming the divine, Metatron, right? I become a new quality of intimacy. And when you and I become closer and we deepen something in our relationship, we deepen our kindness, we deepen our recognition, we deepen our ability to feel each other, we create a new quality of intimacy between us and the space in between. And a new God appears and a new voice appears. And that voice is a new voice of God. It's a new intimacy. I am more God to come. I am the more God to come. You know, maybe we'll finish with this and I'll turn to Krista to take us into prayer. I got a beautiful text this morning, and I'll change the names to protect the innocent. And the text was, today I saw, and I'll make up a couple names. I'll use the names Jack and Lily, right? And so the text was like this that I received. If I am not more Lily to come, if I'm not more Lily to come, there's a dimension of my beloved Jack that cannot be more Jack to come, and I can't allow it. Madly, Lily. That's the love note we write to our beloveds, right? If I'm not more Lily to come, then there's a dimension of my beloved Jack that can't be more Jack to come, and I can't allow it. Madly, Lily. And as the love note we write to each other is, if I don't become more God to come, then you can't become more goddess to come. Then you can't become more God to come. And that's what it means to be a unique self symphony. That's what it means to be a band of outrageous lovers. That's what it means to create evolutionary we space. That's what it means to create a new quality of intimacy, which is evolutionary intimacy, which is omni-responsible for the whole. And that's what it means to spell evil backwards, which is live, right? When I move from anti-life to life, when I feel the whole again, right? Evil comes in the wound. The wound splits me off from the whole, right? Wow. What a crazy delight to be together in this place, in this time. Who are we? Where are we? We're a think tank. It's true. We are what the lineage called Chavraya Kadisha, a holy band of outrageous lovers, all wounded healers. And all healing means is for the sake of the whole. That's all it means, right? The word healing, same root as whole. Wholeness and healing are the same. To heal is to split off the wound that dissociates me, right, from the whole. Can you feel that? Cha. Cha. How great to be together.